Welcome back. We're on deck. Prep Test 85, Section 3, question number 21. The issue presented is an assumption, necessary assumption. Which one of the following is an assumption the argument requires? Okay, here goes. In an experiment, some volunteers were assigned to take aerobic classes and others to take weight training classes. Please stop for a second. Aerobics, weight training. You're assigned to do that. Not told any specifics, but okay. Because you're not told any specifics about the volunteers. You're not told any specifics about the nature of the programs, but you just have this really high-level picture of, okay, some volunteers, aerobics, some weight training. Next. After 3 months, each performed an arduous mathematical calculation. Now, just stop for a second. The word arduous refers to the mathematical calculation. It does not refer to the aerobic or weight training. Okay, so let's see what happens. Just after that challenge, the measurable stress symptoms of the volunteers in the aerobics class were less than those of the volunteers in the weight training class. Okay, so maybe there's some relationship, maybe not, right? Up to this point. Okay. Next, and this is the conclusion. So this is what we care about because this is what we have to affirm. This provides good evidence that aerobic exercise helps the body to handle psychological stress. All right. So we come down on the aerobic side. So just be aware, when you come down on the aerobic side and you say, this is good evidence that aerobics helps, right? The other side of that is weight training. So when you say aerobics helps, you're doing it in comparison to the weight training. So if you're going to say the aerobics helps, and you don't say anything about the weight training explicitly, you have to be saying implicitly that the explanation for performing that mathematical thing had to be that it was more valuable to take aerobics than weight training, which means weight training, there's got to be some relationship between weight training and negative outcomes and aerobics and positive outcomes. So let's see what we come up with. 3 months is enough time for the body to fully benefit from aerobic exercise. It doesn't have to fully benefit. It's not required for the argument's validity that you receive the full benefit. It's simply that the benefit from one outweighed the benefit from, if there was any benefit, from the other. B, the volunteers who were assigned to the aerobics classes did not also lift weights outside of class. That's not necessary for the conclusion. The conclusion can live without that. The conclusion is the aerobics helps, right? So the aerobics could still help even if they were lifting weights outside of class. C, on average, the volunteers who were assigned to the aerobics classes got more exercise in the months in which they took those classes than they had been getting before beginning the experiment. So, maybe you were getting more before you. It's what happened during the experiment, not what you did before. So it certainly doesn't have to be true, right? That the folks who took aerobics were not getting more aerobic training before they took that than during it. D, on average, the volunteers assigned to the aerobic class found it less difficult to perform the mathematical calculation than did the volunteers assigned to the weight training class. It's an interesting wrong answer. It's not a question of it being less difficult. You're going to draw a inference between it being less difficult and having lower stress, but that's a permissive inference. It doesn't necessarily follow. If in fact what's happening here is that the aerobics is lowering the stress level, well then it might not matter that it was a complicated mathematical thing. So I'm not feeling D. E, on average, the volunteers assigned to the aerobics classes got a greater amount of aerobic exercise overall during the experiment, including any exercise outside the classes, than did other volunteers assigned to the weight training classes. And yeah, that's the answer. And again, you're taking the position that it was well, think about it. If the conclusion is aerobic exercise helps, right? But 80%, say you had 800 hours of weight training and 200 hours of aerobic, and you had these outcomes, you might draw the conclusion that there's a relationship between weight training and stress. Meaning not that you might not have enough evidence to say that the aerobics reduces stress, but you might have ample evidence to say that weight training may be leading to stress. Even if they were 50-50, even if they were identical. You'd say, well, how do I know? How do I know which one? But here, the assumption is that, yeah, you spent more hours doing aerobic training than you did weight training, because that's necessary for your conclusion that it is the aerobics that helps. So you got to have some kind of factor to make aerobics stand out. So the answer is E, and I think that's quite difficult. But the answer there is E for question 21. Question number 22. The issue is which one of the following, if true, most undermines the reasoning. Okay, what do we have here? Insurers and doctors are well aware that the incidence of lower back injuries among office workers who spend long hours sitting is higher than among people who regularly do physical work of the type known to place heavy stress on the lower back. So you stop for a second. I'm thinking, we're in New York, so I'm thinking like a Con Ed worker climbing a pole, or a Verizon person climbing a pole, and let's presuppose that person puts a lot of stress on your lower back, and you're comparing that person with an office worker, okay, who's sitting in an office, and we have information here that insurers and doctors are well aware that the incidence of lower back injuries among office workers is higher. Okay, so stop for a second. So immediately you should be thinking, well, yeah, there are two separate factors here. In other words, it could be that office workers have a greater incidence of lower back pain because of something that takes place in the office that has an effect on the back. It could also be the case that the Verizon worker, or the Con Ed worker, the person who's climbing a utility pole, is engaging in conduct that makes it less likely they will ultimately get back injury. To have stress on the back does not necessarily mean you have injury on the back. So we'll see where we go here. That's the end of it. This shows that the office equipment and furniture are not properly designed. So this is not all that difficult to undermine. You're saying, basically you're saying these people are in equal positions. The utility worker, the office workers, they're in the same position. One has greater stress on the lower back, and one's sitting in a chair all day. And now you're taking, and they're equal. Well, they may not be equal. And so here, this shows that the office furniture is not properly designed. So we're attacking the premise, which is the argument's conclusion here, but we're attacking that the chair is responsible for harm. So we can either do that by showing the chair is not responsible for harm, or we can do that by showing that the utility worker isn't at risk of the same type of injury. We're not talking about stress. Stress doesn't necessarily mean injury. So let's see what we have here. Hey, when they are at home, laborers and office workers tend to spend similar amounts of time sitting. So that's keeping everything equal, so that's not changing anything. B, insurance companies tend to dislike selling policies to companies whose workers often claim to have back pain. I just don't have a clue why anybody would pick B. It just completely loses me. If you're doing IRAC, a real benefit of it is when an answer choice really is just poorly drafted, and to me that's just poorly drafted. It's going to be so clear to you. You're just going to dismiss it and not be losing time over it. C, people who regularly do physical work. Okay, that's my Verizon or my Con Ed worker. People who regularly do physical work of a type known to place heavy stress on the lower back, okay, yeah, are encouraged to use techniques that reduce the degree of stress. That seems to help. But again, that's talking about stress, not necessarily injury. So yes, you're going to say, well, there's going to be a connection between stress and injury. But maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know that. So I mean, I would certainly keep C alive, but stress is distinguishable from the actual industry. So let's see what we have. D, most of the lower back injuries that office workers suffer occur while they are on the job. Well, that certainly doesn't weaken this reasoning, it strengthens it. And E, consistent physical exercise is one of the most effective ways to prevent or recover from lower back injury. And that's the answer. And really what they're getting at here is that I believe that difference between experiencing stress is distinguishable from incurring injury. And so E is saying that physical exercise, right, that Verizon guy or gal, right, is getting, is one of the most effective ways to prevent or recover from back pain, lower back injuries. So E is the answer. He's clear and convincing to me. So that was questions 21 and 22.